There's a storm across the valley. The clouds are rolling in. The afternoon is heavy on your shoulders. There's a truck out on the 4 lane, a mile or more away. The whining of his wheels just makes it colder.
Welcome to Community Forum. My name is Priscilla Almquist Olson, your host, and today is May 5th, 2021. Because of the pandemic, we are still having our interviews by Zoom. So, welcome everybody, and welcome Linda. It's such a pleasure to have you. And I must say that you haven't changed so much since we were in high school together at Oliver Ames. And um, and but yet you have really accomplished so much. You're a writer. You became an RN, and now you're an author. And from what I understand, you're starting your 10th book. So we all want to hear all about it. So why don't you give us a little background about yourself?
Okay, as quickly as possible because it covers 81 years. But after graduation, I went to Brockton Hospital. 18 of us graduated in 1960. I was the only one to leave, as my director of nurses told me at graduation. I went on to Floating Hospital in Boston, that's now New England Medical Center for Children. And I stayed there for 2 years. Those were the desperately ill children. We worked in gown and masks. But when I got pregnant with our first daughter, I married a month after getting out of nursing. So I was really never lived alone. That was tough when I was widowed at 30 because I had never known anything but people around me. Anyway, we were married almost 9 years when he suffered a fatal heart attack in the house and he never regained consciousness. Our children were 2, 5, and 7. And the four of us spent the next 5 years together. We were blessed because I lived on borderland at the time, and in the what they now call the Captain Tisdale house, and it was Blanche James's alternate summer home. And because I was Blanche James's night nurse when she needed me for 5 years, when Jack and I sold the house in Brockton, we didn't want to buy right again, so we thought we'd raise our children in New Hampshire. Well, that didn't happen. And so I was with her one night. We spent a lot of her sleepless nights. We roamed a lot through the castle. She took me through the floors, and it was a great experience knowing her. She wrote her 1,500-page book about her dad, Adelbert Ames. When she started, she was 81, my age now, and she finished it when she was 86. Amazing, amazing lady. If anybody gets a chance to go to the castle in Easton, it's quite a place. She did have one quick story. She did have two vases at the front of the house, and she said to me once, "What do you think of them?" I said, "I don't like them. They're ugly." And she said, "That's the way I feel, but what are you going to do? They're Ming." So she said, "I'm so old. I'm getting all my relatives' things now given to me." So she said, "There they sit." She was a great, I learned a lot from her. When she
I
died, she gave me her book.
I see. I didn't know that you did that. That's wonderful. So for our listening audience, we don't call it the castle; we call it the Borderland Mansion.
Oh
And
my goodness.
yes, it's a mansion to us, but it's a castle to you, and it certainly
It
would
was,
be.
it, it was to Blanche. She was
Was
her
it?
castle. Yeah.
I see. So she called it the castle.
Uh-huh.
Oh, interesting.
I
My
had one writer at one point said to me, "Could you tell me some personal things about Blanche?" I said, "I could, but I won't." He said, "You're a good nurse."
Well, you might be interested to know, Linda, that recently the school committee set Blanche Ames Elementary School as their name. The new
Oh, my God.
Yes, and so it's a new elementary school, and it will have Blanche's name.
Oh,
So
that's wonderful.
yeah, she's getting recognized. And she was
Um,
such a interesting and multi-talented person. She was not only quite a magnificent artist, but she also was a suffragette. And an interesting side note is that Mary Ames Buckingham
Yeah.
was on the opposite side of Blanche Ames when
Yes.
during the suffragette movement. That's something that I just recently learned several years ago. I wasn't aware of that. But anyway, Blanche was an independent woman who fought for women's rights long before it was popular, and she was quite a lady.
She was the first president of the life movement for abortions. She was its first president.
I see.
Planned Parenthood. Yeah, Planned Parenthood.
Oh, for Planned Parenthood, yes, yeah.
I keep losing your voice, Priscilla.
Really? Okay, is
Yeah.
that better?
Okay, that's better. That's
Okay.
better.
All right. Yes, and she gave my father, who was chairman of the Board of Selectmen for many years, Harley Almquist, she gave him a book that she wrote a note in there to my dad and signed it in 1969, and
That's when I got mine.
that was the year she died.
Yes.
So she signed it before she died, and I have recently donated it to the Eastern Historical Society.
Oh, good.
I felt that's where it belongs.
So now I don't have to.
No, well, it was not that book. It was another book about, I'm having a senior moment, but it was about, I think, I'm not quite sure, but what one of the other aims is. Yeah. So you may want to donate yours because I don't know if they have one about she wrote herself.
Right.
Yeah. I want to talk to Frank Menino, the curator, and see if they have one. Anyway, let's get back to you.
Okay.
You have had a very interesting life, and so sorry that you became a widow so young. And that gives us a segue into one of the books you wrote, and I think it might have been the first book, was it not?
My Widow's Window.
Yes.
That was my fifth book.
Oh.
Because I wrote this late when Jack Crowley died. In order to stay sane, I wrote at night, and anything the children said during the day that was funny or dear, I wrote down. I had a box filled with papers, paper towels and silly stuff, but I wrote it down before I'd forget them, and I threw them in the box. And a few years later, after he died, I said, I wanted to write the book for my children, because at 2, 5, and 7, they didn't understand what was happening, really. And I wanted their words in it too, so that they could remember what they said. And after he died, I put it away for a few years, and I pulled it out. It was a big box of things. And I said, now I'm going to start writing that. And I opened it up, and the tears flew, and I couldn't emotionally handle it. Put it back on the shelf for a few more years. This thing took 30 years before I was able to write without the pain and just good memories. So it didn't go on up on Amazon until 2014. That's why it was my fifth book.
Hey, can you tell us the name of it again, please?
Through the Widow's Window.
Yes, Through the Widow's Window. And you can get it on, yes, and you can get it on Amazon.
It's still on Kindle. It came off the regular one this year, but Kindle still has it. And there are a few bookstores that I pulled my books out this year because they wanted a 40% commission now. Well, that makes the book price absorbent. I just didn't want to make the books cost that much. Mm-hmm. So now in my 80s, I have a supply in the house. And when someone wants it, or I do a book signing, which I'm hoping to do another book signing in October at the Coonamessett Inn here in Falmouth. It would be my fourth book signing there. We're very comfortable with each other. And the book that I wrote last year, which was actually a companion to this book, and it's called Am I Gone? It didn't go out it hasn't gone out at all because pandemic hit. So when I bring out my new book in October, they'll both be new. But this was about a year spent with special needs children and their stories. And I held on to it because now it's been 50 years and the children are grown and older, because they were special needs children, and I wouldn't publish it before then. So
Right.
that will be coming out in October.
Very interesting. Well, how you have a web page, don't you?
I don't. I have it, but it's inactive.
I see.
I don't even remember what it was. I know it's still up there.
Okay, well, maybe one of your children could help you resurrect it, because I think that's really important for people to get in touch so they can order know what your books are,
Sure.
and then order the ones that they would like. So in the interim, what is your email address so that people can email you?
LEWilliamsRN@AOL.com.
L Williams RM at AOL.
RN, registered nurse.
Right, RN, right. LE Williams RN at AOL.com.
.com, yeah. Your voice is still knocking out on me for some reason.
Oh, okay. Is it better now?
Yes.
All right.
You need to be closer to the mic, I guess.
I guess I do.
But if anyone listening to this, I much prefer speaking to an audience because there's this give and take. And if anybody out there has questions about writing, use my email and I'll try to answer them.
Yes.
Happy to do that. Anyway, I know it's I suppose you all know who speak to people at large that it's easier that way. I spoke to 92 sixth graders a couple of years ago, and they were fabulous. They were just so good. And when I have an audience, I usually ask them, because what we call a hook in a story, it's writers call a hook, is what grabs the interest of the reader. And that, if you're going to write for readers, you need to know about that. If you're writing journals, and that's great. That's a great cathartic, and I did that to survive sorrow many years. But if you're going to write for a reader, you need to have a hook, because you know yourself, when you go to a bookstore, you go online now, you kind of open the book and you read the first page and you get a feeling for the author if you don't know the author. And if it doesn't grab you, you shut the book and go on to another one. So it's very important that the writer does not write for themselves. They write for the reader. And I recently had a young high school girl who wanted to write a dinosaur book. And she wanted to name them people names. And I said, number one, you're writing for 4 to 8-year-olds. So you have to get into the skin of them. Remember when you were 6, or remember when you were 5, how you felt. It's vivid to me, but apparently not so much to some. But the point is, you have to write for them. You have to use the vocabulary for a 4 to 8-year-old. The little ones, it's enough to say brown bear, bushy-tailed squirrel. That's their names as far as they don't need to know it was Betty Squirrel. So we did away with Betty Squirrel. And she understood finally that she had to be in the story as the writer. She was writing from inside the story, not outside. And that makes a huge difference.
Yeah, can you give us an example of the hook that you posed in one of your books?
Mm-hmm. So I lost your voice again.
Okay, can you pose? Can you show us one of the hooks that you used to grab the attention of the reader in one of your books.
Surely.
And
This is
maybe you
That's
could
my
do a-
favorite book of all the books. It's 50 stories and poems for children. And someone asked me, well, who wrote them? I said, I did. Why am I showing you? But this for children. Let's see what we have here. Here's a quick poem, 102. Yeah, as an aside, during this book, I had my son and daughter, when they were young, draw pictures for it. But my only stipulation, and my sons they were both very good artists. I said they have to look like a 6-year-old drew them. And this is what he drew. And I told him, I'll pay you $5 for each one that you draw, but they have to be a 6-year-old drawing them. And I turned down 3 because they were too good.
Can you show us?
Can you see that?
No, you have to hold the book up higher. That's it. Very good. Oh boy. Yeah.
So that's the 6-year-old. And that's Liza Jane Jones. And Liza Jane Jones said, I am Liza Jane Jones. I am not nice at all. That's the hook. Because every little kid knows they're not nice at all sometimes. I pull on the cat's tail and I run in the hall. One rainy day when there was nothing to do, I sat in my closet and spit in my shoe. They can identify with that kind of thing. And they love the pictures. And well, I could go on forever in this book because it's my favorite book. But that book goes $20. I've kept all my hardcover books at $20. Even though everybody that I'm around is saying, and I do go in the bookstore sometime, they're averaging $28 now. That just bothers me. And that's what it would have had to be if I left it in the bookstore with a 40% commission. That's why I pulled them out so that I can keep it at 20.
Very good. So tell me how you got started on the very first book that you wrote.
The very first book I wrote was 1989. I had my first book signing at the 400. Debbie Dowling helped me with it. There were no such thing as book signings that far away. Nobody was doing it. Let me get the book. Oh, and on top of it, the book came with little stuffed animals. And this was Poe and Laurie. And together they were Poe and Laureate. Together they were Poet Laureate. It was just a little play on word. I wanted to see if anybody catch it, and a few did. It has double the arms for double the hug. And that sold with the first book. I was in Hong Kong at the time. My husband was in the toy business. And I went to one of the plush salesmen and I said, I had this idea. I said, could you make them for me? So he did. And he shipped them to me. Well, 80% of them arrived with 2 arms, no arms. It was a horror show, but we finally got it. But I didn't do this again. I went out of the stuffed toy business after that. But these were the 2 books that Poe and Laurie wrote. And it's by Poe and Laureate. Can you see it?
Yes, A Child's Keepsake.
A Child's Keepsake. So that book on a Sunday afternoon at the 400 from 12 to 2, I had a book signing that book and Poe and Laureate. 125 people showed up.
My goodness.
Couldn't believe it. I thought that was normal because I'd never done a book before. Mm-hmm. So I thought that was, well, I guess not. Well, it was not normal. It was just that nobody had done it before in Easton like that. Mm. And Debbie was great. She put the ad in the paper. And I still remember Leo Harlow coming with his wife. and buying the book. And I sometimes mean to ask him if I ever see him, do you still have it? Because his kids are well grown now, long time ago. When was that? 90? Yeah, 30 years ago. So they're all in their 30s now.
Well,
And then the next, oh,
yeah, I'm sure that his wife is Helen.
yes.
And they're alive and well, and they're still living in Easton.
Wonderful.
I see them occasionally, especially at the Historical Society. But I'm sure that
She is such a lady.
I'm sure they still have your book.
Oh, I'm good. And this is Lefty the Right Boot. And this I wrote with photographs. A friend was a photographer, wedding photographer. So we actually went to the Stoughton mill that's gone out of business now, but they made boots. So Lefty the Right Boot was about a pair of children's boots who were totally different. One wanted the exciting life and wanted to be everywhere. That was Lefty. And Righty just wanted to keep a little boy's feet warm. So it kind of goes through the emotional thing of how do two brothers stuck together, so to speak, learn how to live a good life.
Mm-hmm.
And I liked writing that. I had special training in child psych for my pediatric nursing, and I used it in this book.
Interesting. Wow.
So that was fun. And we went right into the boot factory where they had boots, and we put Righty and Lefty on the movable racks there that the boots were on, and took pictures of them going along and going upstairs at night to listen to Galosh, the antique boot. So we had a lot of fun with that book.
Now,
every book is different.
Those two books are for children, and most of your books are for children, isn't that
Yes.
right?
Yes, 6 of them are children's books, usually 4 to 9. I do have one. Orient Express is for people 9 to 12. They call them middlers now. And that's about, and the hook on this line is, I can personally tell you, summer birthdays are the worst. Nobody's home. My birthday arrives right after school ends, and my friends have already left the city for vacation. So that tells her immediately that school is out. Well, she is an only child, but all her friends have gone, and there's no one there for her birthday. So she's feeling really low. She's kind of laying her head on the windowsill and watching rain drip on her world. And then the grandparents call, and they take her to Europe on the Orient Express. So Jack and I did go on the Orient Express, and I wrote everywhere we went. We've traveled the world, and everywhere we went, I wrote. So I inculcated Molly into our story, and she becomes the narrator. She's telling everybody, this is what happened, and this is where we went, and God, there's so many things in it. But the big thing was she meets the first love of her life. She's turning 13, and she meets this first love of her life, and he's French, and he has black hair down to his shoulders and these brown eyes, and she falls madly in love. Now, this was a kid until then who thought, guys, she was like me. I use a lot of me in my stories because writers are supposed to know, we're supposed to write about what we know because then it sounds authentic. And I was a great sports enthusiast. I was in all the sports in high school. And boys were great, but in the 50s, you had a steady boyfriend. Most of us did. We were small. And so I didn't think that much about boys. So I made her the same way. She's a track star. And she really didn't have anything much to do, but she fell head over heels with this kid. And it's just first love. We never forget that we first love, whether we fall in love at 12 or 18. So that was fun to write because I followed the map where we went on the Orient Express, and we stayed overnight on it a couple of nights. And so it's kind of a good history lesson for that age group who aren't that crazy about history and geography.
Well,
So that
I can-
every book's been fun.
that is really good. So that's the 9 to 12 group. No.
Yeah, these are all, my hardcovers are all $10. It's,
Okay.
you know, I'm getting older, so I've got, these are 10 and the hardcovers are 20. And then there's just one that I hand make. I had started it in, I originally called it the Millennium Bride because I started it in 2000. And it's a cookbook with my grandmother's and my mother's and my recipes over the years. And when my granddaughter was 18, she said, Nana, could you do me a cookbook with your recipes? I said, sure. And I figured, 60 pages. A year and a half later, it's 320 pages. And I hand make them for wedding gifts now, or shower gifts. And they're $59. Where can you get a shower gift or a wedding gift for that anymore? But I'll show it to you quickly. It's an impressive gift. It's very big, but it's all hand washable. Every one of them comes out if you want it. And you use it, put it back. If you get junk on it, you just wash it off. But that's called now Cooking with Cassie. That was my grandmother. So that I've made probably well over 300 of these over the years. And I hand make them for anybody who wants a special homemade gifts anymore.
So
Are getting rare.
each page, Linda, is in a sleeve, plastic
Yeah.
sleeve. Is that correct?
Yes.
So you could take it out, and then if anything spilled on it, you just wipe it off.
Yeah.
Great
I
idea.
love it. I love it.
Wonderful.
So that's where I'm at right now.
By the way, I cannot believe that you were more of a tomboy in high school, because you were one of the prettiest gals in your class. And if we have, perhaps I can, at the end, if with your permission, I could put up your class photo. When you graduated.
Oh my goodness.
You were so absolutely beautiful.
I haven't seen that in years.
And you still are. And I'm telling you, that photo of you is so authentic, and how I remember you. So maybe we can put it up at the end of this program. So tell me about the window.
I never knew I was pretty in high school. Honestly, I was raised in a house with 4 boys and a Marine dad. We did not talk about feminine things in that house. We talked about sports, and you get down, you get back up. Well, it's held me in good stead when I was widowed, I'll tell you, because I had been raised like that. Yet I have a younger sister, Catherine, who is a lady. She came up on my mother's side. I came up on my dad's side. I was out in the woods with them all the time. And it made a big difference. So I truly, till I got in nurse's school, I never even thought about it. I thought I was neat. And somebody said, what the hell is the matter with you? You're pretty. I said, I never knew it, but I'm just as glad I didn't know it. Because it might have changed my personality. I don't know. I wasn't trying to be something I wasn't.
Yeah.
Maybe I was
you always had a very positive, upbeat personality. You were always smiling, laughing, and enjoying yourself. So let's get to the more serious book, Window to a Widow's World. And is that the name of it?
Through the Widow's Window.
Window. Okay.
Yeah. Now, the hook on this book, as I've said, you have to catch somebody. And I have macular degeneration in both eyes now, but they're okay because I get them injected every month, and it keeps me from going blind, so it's worth it. But I've begun to memorize things that I don't want to forget. And one of them is the first paragraph of this, if I can remember it. Let me think. I can't comprehend what's happening. Comprehend what's happening. Only visual images surface as I survey the make-believe grass surrounding my 32-year-old husband's opened grave. Cemeteries leave me cold, even in summer. But this frigid January morning wielded no power over me. I felt nothing. I felt nothing.
Wow.
It,
Well,
it
that
still
is,
gets me. The gray morning, what the heck did it do? Oh, it warned me. There was another storm approaching, but I didn't really understand. That line became a metaphor, and very few people picked up on that, but it was a metaphor. Uh, Behind me, I heard an elderly woman say, "I don't believe this." And her words wafted through the fog in my mind, while whispers of wind scattered long hair across my dry eyes. That was the beginning. I opened
wow.
at the cemetery.
Yeah, that certainly would make anybody want to finish reading that book.
Oh, I've had more than a few call me afterwards saying, uh, I started to pick it up to read a couple pages, and one lady says, "I finished it at 3:30 in the morning, and my husband thought I was nuts." She said, "But I couldn't put it down." And another one said, "You were very honest," and I did try to be. Some of it isn't flattering to me, but that was the way it was. I was alone with three little kids, and they were alone with me. And I was scared to death if something happened to me, what was going to happen to these children. So from the beginning, I made them independent. I made them think for themselves, to the point where one neighbor said to me one day, "You've got that 3-year-old pulling garbage out for the men. Isn't he kind of young?" I said, "No, he's not too young. He has to be independent." And she looked at me like I was nuts, but he did have to be.
Right.
It was the only way that I could feel secure when I got into bed at night, that they're going to be okay. The only problem was when Kathleen hit puberty, she got independent and I had to live with it. But I had done that. So those were hard times for us.
Yeah.
But,
I think, don't you think, Linda, that during that period in our lives in the 50s, we were taught to, we were given our freedom and given our independence. And on one of my other shows, Growing Up in Easton, which I hope you can appear on, most of the people mentioned that independence that they got from the freedom that their parents gave them. So, they would get on their bikes and go to Frothingham Park, and,
yeah,
and they didn't, when the streetlights came on, that was the signal to go home.
you're right.
And most of the people say that was the best time because we learned to trust ourselves, have confidence in ourselves, be independent, feeling that we could do anything. And
We had no locks on our doors.
no,
We had no keys to our doors.
no.
And I was 12 years old. Saturday morning, I was on my bike for the whole day. In fact, one time I biked up to Mary Frothingham's house. It really was dependent. And I knocked on the door and the maid came out and I said, "I just wanted to thank Mrs. Frothingham because in 5th grade, all those young guys, we got a present. Every child in Easton, Mary Frothingham gave a present to." And I wanted to thank her. And she came, she said, "Wait a minute." I came back to the door and she said, "She wants to speak to you." So we got into her elevator and I went up. She was sitting in a chair and thanked me for coming. And wasn't that nice? And we sat and talked for a while. And I got out and left. I never told my mother. I never told her I had gone to see her. It was just, I just was going to thank her for the 3 green Girl Scout soaps she gave me. And
Yes.
that was, I mean, you couldn't do that now. You'd have police at the door. Yeah, we were lucky. The 50s, we were happy days.
They were. And for the listening audience, those gifts that she gave once a year, those were
Yes.
Christmas presents.
Yes.
Christmas presents. And we were up at the high school, which is the yellow building now. And girls were on one side, the boys were on the other, would go up the stairs. And on either side of Miss Frothingham was a Santa Claus with a huge big bag, right,
Oh, my.
of presents. And so the boys would take their present and shake hands with and thank Mrs. Frothingham. And then the girls would also. So you had two sides of the stage, one for the boys, one for the girls, coming up, getting their presents, and thanking Mrs. Frothingham by shaking her hand and then going back to their seats. I will never forget that. That was in the big auditorium, which was also a basketball court, the balcony, and we would have.
Sure.
And I can remember when I was in seventh grade, I was in that building, and eighth grade, ninth grade there, and we would have our dances. We called,
Oh, yes.
what did we call them? Hops? What was it?
Yeah, they were the Saturday night after the football game dances is what
Right.
we, in the mid-50s, yeah.
And also, sometimes our gym classes would be dance classes, and the girls would be on one side of the gym floor and the boys on the other, because they wanted to teach us how to dance. And so the boys would get up and they would have to choose somebody. Oh, those were the days, huh?
Those were good days. Those were, yeah, they
So-
were good days.
So you have incorporated, I imagine, much of those good days in your stories.
Especially for the children, my 50 stories, much of them, in fact, the front page is a farm, because I was raised in Southeastern on a little farm, and I had the job when in the beginning it was goats and it was sheep. If a mother died, my job was the 9 o'clock feeding at night, because my dad worked 3 to 11 as a machinist in Charlestown shipyard. And I went out there with my flashlight every night with the warm bottle and sat in the small shed and fed the babies because they had no mother. That became one of my stories. And while I'd be feeding them, the other baby goats would be chewing on my long brown hair. And it was such a feeling of serenity to be sitting in this sweet smelling hay all by myself in the dark with just a little flashlight and this baby. And I think that's why I went into pediatrics, because I was always taking care of the babies every year.
Interesting.
And I loved it. And that's where, even when I was pregnant, I went to a preemie nursery. So I worked up, my first one, I worked up till the week I was due. I brought in the baby to one mother and she said, "Mother of God, get in the bed." And I delivered a week later. But when you got 3-pound preemies in your hand, it's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, there were a lot of stories like that anything I did was in Orient Express was because I went. And it's just, yeah, I've put as much of myself as I can into my books to make them real.
Yes. Now, tell us, you obviously got married again.
Yes, 46 years.
My goodness, because you were so young when your first husband passed.
Yeah, yes. I had just turned 30 and he was 32.
That's just amazing. Oh my
It
goodness.
was, and it was really, I was blessed that we were on borderland, because John was only 2. And when the girls were at kindergarten and second grade, we would walk through the woods. And John eventually knew what spots in borderland, what the deer, where the squirrels were. They all had their own vicinities in that 1,800 acres of land. And there was even the cottage, well, I call it cottage, but it was a fishing shed. And what the heck was his name? Not Franklin Roosevelt, the other one. Teddy Roosevelt in the late 1890s. He used to fly into their private airport that's now a meadow there. And he would fish and hunt with the Ameses. And that was their little hunting shed. there. I didn't know that at the time, but we used to go in there and sit, and there was a little seat in there, and it was at a little pond with the ducks. So John grew up with that. That was his background, and he never let it go. He always had little snakes in the garage and pails, and until one day I said, that has to stop, John. They have to go back to their mothers. Why? Why? I said, because one just crawled over my foot. So that was the end of the snakes in the garage. But grown up, he had 4-foot snakes he would put in a backpack and go out in the woods, or he'd sit at night with them draped around his collar. And he was always the woodsman.
Yeah.
And he's always had all kinds of things to keep animals and fish in his apartments.
Now, I think when you talk about the hunter's shed, I think that is the summer cottage that, on very, very hot days, Ames family would go there and sleep over. And it's right on Beach Pond, I believe. And you should know that, let's see, who's the Italian producer? He produced Shutter's Island. And
oh my goodness! Dennis Lehane.
And that.
Yeah, it was Dennis Lehane's book, Shutter's Island.
Yes, and that in that book, he filmed one of the scenes. That film, rather, he filmed one of the scenes there at that summer cottage.
Oh,
and it was either that one or The Departed. I can't remember.
Yeah. Shutter's Island was a scary book.
Yeah.
That was a scary book. Yeah.
Anyway,
I was just mentioning the other day, he hasn't come out with another one. I like his readings.
Yeah.
But I haven't seen him. He might have, and I just missed it.
Who wrote that book?
Dennis Lehane.
Oh, yes, of course. Yeah, he's quite a writer.
Yeah.
And I know at least 3 movies have been made from his book. So
Yeah.
I'm sure he's doing well. Anyway, so you told us what your favorite book was, but tell me, are there any other books that are not for children that you've written besides the?
I've written, well, yeah, Am I Gone is for adults. It's about special needs children, but it is for adults too. And I wrote it with the purpose of, I wanted regular people to understand what these kids are feeling. And it was their school days. I had been widowed 3 years. John was going into kindergarten, first grade. So I was going to be alone all day. And when I contacted the hospital, excuse me, they wouldn't, would have had to work every other weekend. Well, I couldn't because there was no father. And we didn't have the money for full-time babysitters like that. So I applied at the local school to work with special needs children as an aide. And when I went in for the interview, the principal looked at me kind of funny. He had read my resume. He said, why would an RN come to work as a special needs aide? You make so much more. And when I told him my situation, that I had 3 little ones at home and no dad, he kind of shook his head and he said, well, you're hired. he felt bad for me, but I was delighted because then I was in their school and 9 to 3, and I was home when they came home, and I didn't go nuts alone at home. So it worked out well. My pay was $3.25 an hour. And so I say one of my daughters is a high school teacher, and she teaches advanced biochem and forensics at Cardinal Spellman High School, Kelly Wilder. So we've come a long way, and she got her master's at Bridgewater, and her 2 children, Drew and Victoria, my grandchildren, they graduated from Bridgewater also. My late husband got his master's at Bridgewater State. So we have 3 generations coming out of there.
Yeah. Well, it's now a university.
Yes, that's what I heard. Yeah.
Avery Lee Williams graduated from Bridgewater
Did
State.
he? My
Yes, he
goodness.
did. So, and look what he's done with his life. I think it's a good fundamental education, and you know, it's what one does with what one learns. And
Oh, I lost your voice again.
I said it's what one does with what one learns. So
Oh, yes.
he, and he had a contact on the stock exchange in New York, and he
Good.
got a job on the floor, and that was the beginning of his brokerage years. And he still works a little bit part time. His son Kevin has taken over the firm, but
Yeah,
he came from extraordinarily humble conditions. Also, we were all in the same boat. Everybody came from
I agree.
working class families. My father worked for the Brockton Edison Company. He climbed poles. He fixed, he was a lineman. And,
Right.
and my mother became a caterer to support her children going to college. And, everybody has the same story. But what's interesting is that our generation, Linda, has taken all the independence, confidence that we were given by our parents,
True.
and we have become, just what's the word? We've lived up to a new category. You're an RN. I was a teacher and then became a lawyer. My grandfather worked for the Ames Shovel Factory. You think about the what the generations before us gave us. They gave us
Right.
the will to be encouraged to be better, and to learn more and take that learning to higher heights. And you have done that, and you have done that in amazing ways. When you think about all these books that you've written and how you've taken your life story and incorporated them without taking credit for it. In other words, your stories about the little kids. You're talking in their language, and the adult books are so helpful, especially the one Widow to the. Tell me the widow name, book name again. I have it. I've read it. What's the name?
Through the widow's window.
Through a Widow's Window.
And you know what happened recently? About a year ago, I went on and it was coming off, and they took mine off, and all of a sudden there was a book up there, Through Our Widow's Window. It wasn't mine. It was another woman. And I called the agent and I said, "What's going on here?" And he said, "Well, they finally sold off the last of your books rather than reprint." I said, "But why is she there with my book name?" And he looked in, and it was taken down eventually, but I don't know what that was about. It was like they were kind of coming in and taking over.
Well, you did have a lawsuit there, Linda.
I know I could, but life is too short, and I learned that at 30.
Yeah.
Only fight the battles that I really want to fight.
Good,
But it's
good lesson, right?
I know. But
Well,
I know
tell me, tell us about the last book you're currently writing.
That one is going to be this size. I like this size, and it's going to be paperback, so it can be cheaper, because it just bothers me that people are paying so much money. I mean, I bought Hillary Clinton's book. It was $39.
Yeah.
I couldn't believe it. I said, who needs that?
So your soft covered books are $10. Is that correct?
The soft cover are 10, the hardcover are 20.
Okay.
That's easy for my 81-year-old mind to remember. This is a mock-up of what's coming that I'm finishing up now. It's called Moments in Time, and it's short stories in verse. And this is what the book cover I want it to look like, because I don't want any pictures. And because it's verse, I want the men to know that it's also for men. So I put one of the poems in, and this is actually a poem. I had jury duty many years ago. Got there, and they put us on hold for a couple hours. So I went to this Mill Pond Diner on 28, and got breakfast. And while I was there waiting to see if I had to go, I wrote this poem. Mill Pond Diner, yellow counters, tile floor, people in and out the door, eggs and bacon, coffee black, customers who will come back. Snappy waitress, all for show, leaves them smiling when they go. Breakfast good, lunches too, come on back, we'll cook for you. See the trucks parked in the lot? Truckers know where good food's hot. When a body feels alone, the diner is a slice of home.
That's great. I love that last line.
So those are the poems. I've got a couple dozen poems of my life, over my life. One was when my young husband died, and then our children was under it, and I had poems for each of the children. But there are a couple dozen poems, some of them sad, some of them, one was about a nursing home lament, an old woman in a nursing home, and just so angry, which most of our people in nursing homes are, no matter how expensive they are, how good they are, they're still ultimately alone at night. My grandmother grew up in the house. I grew up in the house with my grandmother. That was what we did. We were always 3 generations in the 50s. Anybody I
Yes.
knew. Anyway, she was so angry, and she said, if I can't find my nylons, I just won't put any on. I'm not going anywhere anyhow. Those people who love me saw to that. It was that, and that's the feeling they had. And so there are poems in it like that. The short stories, because most of my readers are used to children's stories, I warned, I have a critiquer, and I warned her, I said, there's murder in these, there's some, she said, you're murdering people? I said, it's for adults. It's for adults. I just didn't want you to be upset, because as a rule, I write old fashioned for children. That's the stories of the 40s, 50s, and before the 60s hit. And the stories for and about children got a little tougher and meaner. And so I just didn't want her to be too shocked when she read the first one. But it's like, with this one, my favorite book, 50 Stories, it's dedicated for each child it's been my joy to know, and for my adult friends whose inner child is alive and happy.
Oh boy, that's say it all. Well, you
So,
have really accomplished so much, and you have brought back an era that is slowly disappearing or has disappeared. And people need to remember all the good stuff that we enjoyed growing up. We had special childhoods, and our grandparents were never put in a nursing home. They were part of the family. And so it's a entirely different age right now. Maybe your books can help bring back to some people.
I wondered about the pandemic, Priscilla, if maybe it could bring it back, because you're paying $10,000 to $15,000 a month for your grandparent to be in nursing home, and because both parents have to work today if they're going to own a home. That's just the way it is. Mm-hmm. And my first home in 1960 cost $18,000. It was 10 rooms. Now that kind of a house sells for about $800,000-900,000. Mm. So they can't do it alone unless they're vice president of something or other. But it's and a lot of the wives who have come home of necessity, their children are home, have decided, I want to be home. I'm missing my children's childhood. It goes so fast. And a lot of them aren't going back to the workplace. No. The computer at home has done that. Well, if they're home more, maybe their grandmother or their grandfather could come home too. Yeah. I hope that. I don't know if that's realistic, and maybe I'm out of touch too much now. I don't know.
Well, listen, nice. We're sort of out of time at the moment, and I want to thank you so much for a very colorful interview and all of your stories. And I can see why the words just roll out right off your lips as you speak, so that writing for you was not a chore, but a happy
Oh,
journey.
no, it's a lonely profession because of necessity. We have to be alone to write. But it's so fulfilling. I get into a story, no matter how terrible things are around me. I get into the story and I'm gone. I'm in the story until I have to go back to make dinner or whatever. All right. When the kids were little, I laughed one time. I said to them, you know, I've got half an hour to write. You watch, it was Sesame Street at the time. I said, you watch Sesame Street. I'm going to be in the kitchen writing. And I only want to see you if you're bleeding. My girlfriend said, that's an awful thing to say. I said, they understood. They
Yes,
understood.
and obviously our mothers said that to us too.
Yes. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
Okay, well,
It
thank
wasn't a bad thing.
Linda Manning Williams, thank you so much for sharing all of your wonderful stories and your very interesting and wonderful life with us.
I'm always happy to come to anybody. I mean, I've spoken over the years to second graders all the way up through 70-year-olds who want to learn to write. They don't know how to write. I said, I've never met a person who couldn't write. Just
No,
come to me.
I agree with you. In my former life, I taught creative writing.
Yeah,
So
there you are.
and I've written poems and so forth. But what you've done is very close to my heart, and I appreciate so much
Well,
your
thank you for having me. My goodness.
yes and coming on the show. But most importantly, your joie de vivre and your love of writing and books and your love of life, and
Yeah. Love of
overcome
life.
so much. And I really admire what you have given to your children, the legacy that your life has meant, and given to your kids. So thank you once more. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
And at the end of the show, we're going to have your email address so people can get in touch.
Good. Good.
And,
Happy to
and
talk to
maybe
anybody.
maybe we can get that 1957 photo of you on it too. Hopefully,
Oh my goodness.
thank you again. And
All right.
to our viewing audience, thank you so much for joining us, for meeting Linda Manning Williams today, and hopefully you will get some of her books and enjoy them now that you know much more about Linda and about her books and what they offer to you and the general public. Thank you again.
And thank you to my Easton friends. I miss you. I think of you often.
Okay. So
Have a great day.
thank you so much. And this is Priscilla Almquist Olsen saying goodbye. Stay well. Until next time. Thank you.
Good girl.